Good evening. I'm calling to order the November 21st school committee meeting at 7:02 p.m. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. One note before we start. They are doing an IT reset of a switch shortly after 9 p.m. tonight. So at about 9 o'clock, when that happens, our live feed will be shut down. However, the meeting will continue to be broadcast and will be available up on the NACAM website in a few days. Right now, we are scheduled with our agenda to be done at 9 o'clock. So we're going to try and get it in before that happens, but it will be posted so the public can enjoy and watch afterwards. Thank you. Moving on to consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, could I raise, I don't know, I guess the point of order. When I look
Your microphone.
Oh, sorry. So when I looked at the agenda, I don't see it here, but several months ago, the chair made what I thought was a really nice suggestion that every meeting at the end, we would discuss what members of the committee would like at some point to be on the agenda. It hasn't happened. Of course, mostly we've all been exhausted by then. And I can't tell whether the last item on the agenda is that or not, but I'd like to request that we resume or actually begin. Alyssa's excellent suggestion.
Yeah, so in item number 12 in public comment, Mr. Moskovich, you would be welcome to make a public comment suggesting an agenda item if you would like. However, that would mean we wouldn't necessarily discuss it.
No, but her idea was that we discuss it.
So that's what we could do tonight, and then we can talk with the chair about having that changed for the next, potentially for the next meeting.
When I mentioned this to her, she said it's actually been on the agenda every night, but we haven't gotten to it. And so I wasn't really sure.
So
Is
it
there
could
something
be
before that? Is something about the next meeting?
We announced the next meeting, but right now, as the agenda is constructed, we can do it. We would be happy to hear your comments during public comment to be heard. We could do it then, and then we can further discuss it with the chair before our next meeting on December 5th.
Thank you.
Moving on to consent agenda. First up, we have the minutes from October 24th, 2024. We'll give everyone a few moments to review.
Yeah, should have this on the cover. That's the warrant. I think Dr. Moskovich doesn't have a packet.
Did you get a packet?
Oh, there's an extra one here.
Oh, there we go.
There
Thank you.
you go.
Thank you, Harper.
Thank you.
So the chair would entertain a motion.
Make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the minutes from October 24th as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier.
I'm just still catching up, sorry.
Second.
Second by Mr. Moskovich. Any discussion?
Can I just get another minute to check? So, Mr. Chair, I'm just, this is part of the superintendent's report. Superintendent's report begins on page 2 and finishes on the top of 4. Okay, so that's, no, never mind, I'm good.
Then we'll move on to a vote. Mr. Moskovich,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cormier,
Yes.
the chair votes yes, 4-0. Moving on to grants, Superintendent Lathrop.
We have 2 grants. These are, last time we talked to you about the ECLC mini grants, and we learned that we had 2 more North Andover folks who received these mini grants. One was Dr. Tiffany Goddard, who's the principal at ABECC. She's going to be leading an educational equity and diversity seminar with her staff. Tiffany participated in what's called the SEED project last year, and she became a national trainer, or a statewide trainer, and so she's going to bring that to North Andover. And I don't know if it's on here, but that was a $2,000 grant she received to be able to do that. And then Brian Sheehy, who is our history teacher at North Andover High School, he wrote a grant it's a Democracy and Dialogue exploratory mini grant. He's going to help our young students engage in dialogue and discussion in order to break down barriers, change misconceptions and preconceived notions of individuals and communities, and to build bridges to gain understanding and the perspective of individuals and communities. He's using some materials from the Essex National Heritage and the Smithsonian to provide this professional development. And again, he also was awarded $2,000.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing, the staff and leaders within our community going out and finding these grants and applying and bringing this back in to our community. It's impressive.
It really is. I agree.
2 really amazing opportunities for everybody. Quick question. Oh, no, it's right there. They're in PD and everything. And it's an opportunity for educators in our district to also get in-service credit and PDPs for participating.
Correct.
Fantastic. Shall we take them? Would you like separate, or we'll do them together?
Question, Mr. Chair,
sure.
the second, are both of them PD opportunities? Or
I
just
know
the second
that
one?
the one that Dr. Goddard is doing has a PD opportunity.
The second one says a PD through online modules.
Great. Dr. Goddard's is also offering 2 in-service credits. So depending on what the participants, if they just want professional development or if they want to do an extra piece, they could earn 2 in-service credits. Doesn't look like the history one has in-service credits. If that's something that Mr. Sheehy would like to talk to us about, we certainly can have that conversation with him.
Okay. But it's still a PD formatted?
It's still a PD.
Staffing.
Everybody earns professional development points.
Okay,
And it's free for our staff to attend.
even better.
Chair would entertain a motion regarding.
Also moved, Mr. Chair, I move that we accept both the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity Grant for Dr. Goddard and the Democracy and Dialogue ECLC Exploratory Mini Grant for Mr. Sheehy.
Second.
Ms. Cormier. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Further discussion?
I would like to say thank you to both Dr. Goddard as well as Mr. Sheehy for finding and pursuing these grants for our community.
Thank you very much to them. And to the administration for allowing the PD points and in-service credit to be available. So we'll move on to a vote. Mr. Moskovich.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Cormier.
Yes.
Mr. Hicks votes yes, 4-0. Moving on to communications, student representatives. Hello, Ms. Barrios, Ms. CC, and Ms. Troy, and Mr. I can't read your name, Lewine. It's really far away.
How do you say your last name, Louise?
Mr. Ismail.
How do you say your last name?
Ismail.
Ismail? Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. The yearbook has been asking for all high school students to send in pictures via QR codes around the school. There's a QR code for each grade. Cinderella tickets are now on sale as of yesterday. There are 4 performances, one on Friday the 13th, 2 on the 14th, and 1 on the 15th. And there was a choir concert tonight at the high school. There's a high school choir concert. They've been working very, very hard. And there is a alumni turkey toss on next Wednesday on the half day before Thanksgiving break. The class of 2024 will be able to compete against the current seniors, the class of 2025, to see who can throw turkeys the farthest. And all that is required for entry is one canned good to be brought. And
is the picture in my mind actually accurate?
Frozen, defrosted.
Is the turkey
Frozen.
alive?
no, the turkey is not alive.
But it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
Is there a standard, like, is it the same weight for everyone tossing it?
I'm not sure. This is the very first year that they've done this.
Is it just a stuffed animal turkey?
No, it's a real frozen turkey.
Well, it
Yeah,
could
it's a
still be
real
stuffed.
turkey.
That's bad for your health. Don't do that.
I was about to point that out, Mr. Chair, unless it's cold out.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you donate a canned good and you get to toss the turkey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, pictures for next time.
I'll ask someone else to take photos. I will be participating.
Thank you.
Then win. Go.
But I'll try.
Oh, if you toss it the farther, do you get to take the turkey home and have it for?
No.
I don't think so.
I hope not.
I feel like it should be the opposite. If you go, if you
Yeah, I don't know
toss
that
it
I want that.
the least, you have to take it home. Sorry, you may proceed.
And then there was a NHS induction last Wednesday with both juniors and some seniors getting inducted. And the cell phone committee, talking about a new cell phone policy, is making a survey to send out to teachers, parents, and students.
So an update on knee mask. So North Andover High School hosted the knee mask fall conference November 19th, so this past Tuesday, and it went really well. I have to say I'm very proud of North Andover Student Council. We really exemplified true leadership in the whole region. So at this conference, delegates from all over the region were able to present their workshops that they've been working so hard on. And it went super well. So yeah, that was that. Update on MASR. So Miss McHugh forwarded us. So Miss McHugh forwarded us an email that Miss Lathrop wanted to be sent to us for representatives, me, Harper, Allie, Levine. And basically MASR is the Massachusetts Association of Student Representatives. And we registered to be part of MASR, and we are attending their annual conference this Saturday, which is very exciting. So thank you, Ms. Lathrop, for sending this opportunity to us. Turkey Teachers, the Student Council is hosting their annual Turkey Teacher fundraiser, where basically teachers with the most the teacher with the most food donations gets to wear a turkey costume for the whole day, which is awesome.
They're not.
I know, right?
They're not the one being tossed.
No, they're not being tossed. They get to wear it all day.
It's an
Yes. Why would you not want to wear a turkey costume all day? DECA. So currently, DECA students are going to have to retake their DECA test. So they just took their DECA test. Now they have to redo it because of a mistake that DECA made. They sent out questions that they did last year. So they're sending a new test. Hopefully they'll make it shorter for them. So they don't have to redo a 100-question test again. But we'll see. And yeah. Oh, and the middle school, they hosted a chorus concert yesterday night.
All right, and then starting off with robotics, the Whitman Hanson robotics competition was last Saturday, and we sent our A team, 8568A. They competed, they won tournament champion, and they got the Innovate Award, so props to them.
Nice.
Yep. And then NOS is hosting a robotics competition this Saturday from 8:30 to 4, so feel free to come. And also, there is a volunteering opportunity tomorrow to help set up. And then Future Medical Professionals Club is having a pathologist come in as a speaker Tuesday the 26th after school. And the Bioethics and MedTech clubs are starting an ongoing joint club debate on AI use in prosthetics.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Any follow-up questions from the committee for our amazing student reps?
Do you happen to know the significance of 8568A? Is it just a random team name?
So for robotics, the team names are by numbers. So I believe our school is 8568, and then we have different letters depending on which team they are. And then within that, we have different names. So the A team is the Knights, and I believe we have a team called the Cowboys, and so on.
Are you in the robotics as well?
Yes, I'm on the A team.
Yeah, fantastic. With that win last week, does that mean you've qualified for
States.
And you have to do well at states to move on to
Nationals.
but potentially at a other type of competition, you can do it direct. When you do, we have those later on. If you go with one of those special competitions, can you qualify directly for Worlds, or?
Actually, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure on the distinction between nationals and Worlds as well, because I joined like last week, so like, I don't know all the different competitions, but I do know last Saturdays and this Saturday, and I'll come with more information next time.
We would welcome. It's one of my favorite meetings is when the robotics team comes and demonstrates the machine that you all build and throws things at us. So please come. And also last year we got to hear some singing from the performance in Beauty and the Beast. So please, let's make sure we get to do that to Ms. Lathrop.
So, Mr. Chair, I was going to save this for my community events, but I'm going to be a judge on Saturday, so looking forward to that. Just a quick, I believe the matches don't start till 9. So people show up at 8:30, but I think the action doesn't start till 9. At least that's what they told me.
Yeah.
So.
The person in charge of our team, he told me to say 8:30.
Yeah, he wants to make sure you're there on time. But yes, that's a very exciting event coming up on Saturday.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay. You might have some work to do, but thank you so much for your amazing contributions. I look forward to you going this Saturday to learn how else you can contribute to our conversations, because we would welcome that very much. Public comment? No one else is in the room, so moving on to school committee discussion on, we don't need discussion on public comment. So superintendent recognitions.
Yes, I have a few. So I'm going to start. I really would like to thank the North Andover Fire Department for the work that they've been doing, all of our emergency responders. As you know, the brush fires have been quite challenging. Bless you. The brush fires have been very challenging. Our town manager had to issue a state of emergency yesterday. But we really appreciate the work they're doing to keep us safe. And I want to reiterate the message that both the town manager and the fire chief has set out, that there is a ban on fire pits. There are no fire pits and no charcoal grills. And then I know that the deputy, fire chief or assistant fire chief last night on the news was also really urging folks that to be really mindful if you're deep frying your turkeys this year. And if you have not done that, really pleading to the community, this is not the year to try it. And I really hope that we can respect this ban and be really respectful of our firefighters. So thank you so much. We'll start there. I wanted to thank our ESL and ML teachers who are under the leadership of Nicole Wright and Kristen Ando. They had their first LPAC meeting. I don't know, Kristen, do you want to tell us a little bit about how that went?
Absolutely. We had our first LPAC meeting, which is the English Learner Parent Advisory Council at the Stevens Memorial Library, and we had approximately 40 people there, so we were really excited. Yes. And all of our ESL teachers came to support their families, and we had members from the Spanish Honor Society there to help with the younger children that might have come so that their parents could attend the meeting. And I think they probably had the most fun. And so thanks to everybody involved, but especially my amazing ESL teachers and their team. It was a very successful event.
We want to thank Mr. Gonzalez and his student representatives, and I wish I had their names. I don't have them all. It was one of the things I meant to do today and didn't get to. But last week, they took the school committee and the select board on a tour of the new wing of the middle school, and that was really great. I'd like to recognize the Franklin School staff and Jacqueline Taylor, who's one of our literacy coaches. They hosted Linfield Public Schools this week. They had teachers from grades 1 through 5 who came from, not Linfield, I think it was Littleton, who came to observe a wit and wisdom in action. So it's not always easy to have people in your classroom, so I really appreciate that. Nicole Parker and Sonia Dugan are two special education teachers at North Andover Middle School. They have created something they're calling Coffee and Conversations this year. They had their second event. They do it before school. It's an opportunity it's open to anyone, but it's an opportunity for their families and other families to come and hear about literacy and special education services that they're providing to their students, and to talk about the literacy program. This week they talked a little bit about the IEP process with their families, and so this is something they started new this year. I think I got them all. And lastly, I'd like to recognize Principal Cushing, Richard Cushing. He announced his retirement to his school community and the families last weekend. Richard has devoted 18 years to North Andover Public Schools and many years to public education, and he'll be retiring in June. I think that's all I have for recognition.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving on to roundtable reports.
This is, okay.
We'll go this way.
All right, great. I'm going to repeat a few things just because I want to give them extra shout outs. I was delighted to attend the National Honor Society induction ceremony. It was really great to see all those young scholars and fellow community service people receive their honors. I was really excited to see such strong representation from North Andover softball, I have to say that. I think we had 8.
You were checking them all off.
You are.
It was amazing. I was like, wow, I know her. It was great. Also, the music program had a lot of students that were going by me and by us, and I just want to give Miss Amy O'Terry's a shout out for doing a great job with that. And not only a nice event, the parents obviously really appreciated it, but the kids and for the community. So good, it's excellent. A couple of us also marched in the Veterans Day Parade, which is always meaningful. That was we had some nice weather for a change, which was great. We weren't freezing. Already talked about the robotics tournament, and I really appreciate 2 more things. One, I really appreciated the NAMS tour. That's something since I don't really have any other reason to go there, it was nice to get to see the fruit of the committee's labor to bring that forward and how nice it looks. And then lastly, I want to give a shout out to the NA Parent Resource Network. They have a resource page, and they have quite a few topics on anxiety, eating disorders, vaping, addiction, and things like that. So for folks out there, watching, listening, if any of that is something you're curious about, or hopefully not, but if you have a need to know more about that, that would be a great resource for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate the thanks to Mrs. O'Terry for allowing us to inviting us to the National Honor Society induction. That was great to watch and see, and it's obvious kind of the focus and the leadership that she brings to that. So thank you to her for what she does, as well as for inviting us. And then just the tour of the school by both the principals and the students, walking through and hearing their excitement and things that they noticed and picked out about what was in the building, as well as the principal walking us through really some innovative space for our students. It was a great opportunity.
Thank you. Excuse me. So just to add on to that, I had the pleasure of going to the first trimester day 1 choral concert for the middle school last night. It was held at the high school instead because the middle school auditorium is still being under construction with a new lift and new curtain and lights going in soon. So it was a bigger space, I guess, than what the kids were used to, but wonderful nonetheless. Biased, I think the 7th graders did amazing. It was a really great 80s medley. I was humming along and not trying not to embarrass my child too much. She couldn't see me anyway. But if I'm being unbiased, I think my personal favorite of the night was the sixth graders enthusiastically singing Flowers. They did quite a good job of allowing their voices to fill the very large auditorium. And I could hear the two-part harmony that they worked so hard on. And then thank you to the marching band and for their wonderful marching in the parade as well. I love walking right in front of them because I get to hear the patriotic medley and hum along to that as well. So thank you to the music program and all the people involved in making sure our kids can have access to that. You did amazing. So
Right.
moving on, we have any upcoming of community events?
I have a few that maybe we didn't quite hear about yet. So tomorrow is CPAC Awareness Day, so it's Special Education Awareness Day. So we're encouraging folks to wear your CPAC apparel or gear if you bought any of that, or if you don't have that, if people will wear yellow tomorrow, that would be great. So I don't know if you guys have like a Instagram page or something that you want to shoot that out when you get home, but remind people to wear yellow. And we've heard about the robotics. On November 27th is a half day. We're releasing early on that day for the Thanksgiving break. And just a reminder to our caregivers at home that the time is slightly different than our normal like PD days. So the ABECC will dismiss at 12 o'clock. Our elementary schools will dismiss at 11:50. North Andover Middle School will dismiss at 11:05, and North Andover High School will dismiss at 11 o'clock. We will send out an email reminder to families about that because it's a little bit different than typical.
And what does that mean for lunch availability?
My understanding is that they still provide lunch
Is it a grab and go?
for the students. It's probably a grab and
I
go.
remember
Thank
from
you.
ordering for my daughter, it was the grab and go
Okay.
option for.
Thank you. And then November 30th is the North Andover, well, it's called the Santa Day Parade. I'm trying to think of the group that puts it together. But the North Andover Santa Day Parade is happening on November 30th. I'll be marching with the town manager, so looking forward to seeing everyone. December 4th is the Kittredge School Community Project Forum. It's at 7 p.m. I'm sure that Mr. Brown's going to talk about it a little bit more when we get to the Kittredge Project. And then on December 5th, the Parent Resource Network, the one that Mr. Brown just spoke about, they're having a program at the Stevens Memorial Library. It's a parent-led discussion. A North Andover mom is going to talk about what her family did and what the steps they went through to help their young family member with addiction and provide some guidance. So it's really a parent-led discussion. And I think that's everything because we already heard about Cinderella, which I can't wait to go to. And thank you for the invitation to the North Andover Drama Guild. They sent us a cute, yes, right? And there's a little prize inside there. I feel like I should show it, but they want to surprise, so I won't. So I think that's it.
Thank you. I'm drawing a blank on when our next chat is.
I have that.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier.
So our next school committee community chat. So our next one is scheduled on February 1st. So just as a reminder, the school committee community chats are an opportunity for anyone in the school community to come and talk informally with two members of the school committee. Our next one is, like I said, is February 1st. Then we have one March 1st, and then the next one on June 7th. So I'll work to start getting that information as we get closer integrated in with any kind of calendars or advertising that we have, so we make sure that people are aware of the dates and times that it's coming up.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could, before we leave the topic of recognition, I want to give Mr. Cushing a big shout out because all three of my children went through Kittredge under his watch. So for our family, he's a tremendous building leader. I really admire his work, and I don't know where the cameras are, but he's just been a terrific asset for North Andover, and I'm sad to see him go from that point of view, but I'm sure he's looking forward to it, and personally, it's probably time, and
Yes,
he's
we'll
probably
certainly
ready.
Bring him into a school committee meeting at
But
some point.
he was absolutely fantastic, and just wanted to say that.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going on to the superintendent's central office updates around the district.
Excellent. So our front cover tonight is some pictures from the Thompson School. Thompson grade 3 students worked on some Wampanoag projects. And what I really loved, oops, we're not there yet. Hold on, getting there. Oh, oopsies.
Do we have them in the packet?
See around the district?
Go down a little bit, right by 5. There you go.
There you go.
Is that the wrong?
Oh, she linked the wrong,
That's where
we
you
linked the
also
wrong thing.
linked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to copy of November 21 school committee? No?
No, that's our MCAS presentation.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to share it with you.
Okay.
You always have good pictures. We want to see them.
I know, we want to see the
We want to see the pictures.
Hold
It's
on.
worth the wait.
We're 3 minutes ahead, so. we're
Okay,
good.
great. Talk amongst yourselves. Give us a little preview of Cinderella.
Ms. Ando, while we're waiting, maybe you can tell us what we're supposed to be learning over there.
Oh, goodness. That is, but I absolutely will. And I wish I was more of an expert, but our current reading interventionists are working with our consultant, Eleni, from the Hill for Literacy about how to do structured tier 2 reading support for our students in grades K to 5. And so they are learning like some research-based strategies about how to work in small groups with students who struggle with reading. And so absolutely,
That's an example. Yeah.
that's an example, and it is so much more difficult than it looks, if that makes sense, you know what I mean, or whatever. Like, she's teaching them a lot about like the correction, like when a student miscues, how to correct them appropriately, and it all moves very quick in groups of 4. And yes, learning to read is rocket science, like it absolutely is. And so, but yes, we have wonderful feedback from our reading interventionists who do really hard work every day. And so, good stuff.
I was just curious because we have to fill some time while we're waiting, but
I
it's
shared
been staring at us for the last couple of
It
meetings.
has
That's
been.
right.
I
has?
don't have edit access, so I can't add to the agenda, but I did just share it with you through email.
Sure, I'll put it up.
I think Michelle is trying to link it right now, too. I think it's because she stopped sharing for a second.
I didn't plug so you wouldn't see all my junk.
All your really important stuff.
Oh, really important stuff.
So when the first picture comes
There
up,
we go.
there we go.
There we go.
So those are our 3rd graders at Thompson School, and one of the reasons I put this on is I really they're great and they're cute and they did a wonderful job in their projects, but I really enjoyed the diversity of these projects. You see some students who are working on their Chromebooks, you see some students who did a trifold, you see some that are mostly pictorial, some that have some 3D element to it, and I think this really gave the students an opportunity to express their learning in the way that made sense for them, in a way that they could share. They invited their families in to be able to come and see their projects. So I thought that was a nice way to start this week. And then moving on, here's just some of the things that I've been up to since the last time I saw you. Ms. Ando and I participated in the Commissioner of Education, Russell Johnson's Zoom meeting. Frequently, he'll have meetings for all superintendents and assistant superintendents. Largely, his focus continues to be on attendance. This year's theme is really the power of presence and how important it is to be present in school. So talk to us a little bit about that. Chronic absenteeism, which is certainly something that the state is continuing trying to battle. And then starting to have the conversation now that MCAS is no longer a requirement for graduation. Just making sure, talked a little bit about the retests that will still be happening for our students. I think that doesn't come into effect until December. So we'll still have retests for our students. And then talking about how each school district will have, what our requirements are for graduation, knowing now that MCAS is not one of them. Also on the 12th, I was able to attend the Finance Committee. So I went to the Finance Committee. As you know, I give them a monthly update of where we are in terms of budget, but they wanted some opportunities to ask a few questions. They were very supportive of the school district, supportive of the work we were doing, asked about questions in terms of some of the measures we put in place to try to reduce some of our spending, and if there are some operational changes that we've made. One member did ask, and I said I would share this with the school committee because it's really a school committee decision if you want to go there, but talked about the opportunity for advertising within the school community. So things like the fences around the high school, and whether or not you would want to entertain the option of selling advertising spots, which would bring revenue into the district. So I'm bringing it back to the school committee because I said I would, and something that maybe at some point you want to discuss. On the 13th, Kristen and I led our leadership meeting. So that's when all of our leaders from the district, so principals, assistant principals, directors, program coordinators, we all meet together for a couple hours after sort of the last school gets out. And so our goals this time were really to continue to build and fortify our leadership team. We examined the intersectionality and how that relates to our school communities. So as we start to think about our students and who they are and how they relate into our school communities. As teams, we looked at our MCAS data, and we asked our each of one of our schoolhouses to look at their data. But really, we asked them. It is easy sometimes to quickly go to your deficits, and when you see data, and we really did push them to look for their bright spots, because there are bright spots in all of the MCAS data. So they did some of that work. And then we reviewed the budget, where we were, and we discussed some of our options. I think I spoke to you last time about the work that the leaders are doing are what potential things we could do if we were to reduce our budget, what the impact of that might be, and then we added a column of, is this a reduction that we think we could make now, or is this a reduction we think we might be able to make in September, or July 1, really, when a new budget season comes forward. We've already mentioned National Honor Society. I was able to go. Again, I want to thank Amy O'Terry and Principal Holman for putting together the evening. There were some pictures there of National Honor Society. It really is nice to see the kids, the students, and to see them, and their families are so proud of them for that time. On November 14th, I went, so I'm doing two, part of my monthly visits this month. I'm doing a visit where I meet with the principal or the principal, assistant principal of the building. We spend about an hour together, about talking about some things in their school, and then we tour the building together. And then I'm also doing what I'm calling listening sessions, where I've asked the principals to sort of put me in a spot in the building. The staff knows I'm there, and they have opportunity to just come, and that's where I saw Harper today. They have opportunity to come and just talk to me. It's an open agenda. So I had my first listening session at the ABECC on November 14th. It was very busy. I was busy my whole time that I was there. I talked predominantly to our preschool staff and mostly to our preschool teaching assistants. I really appreciate their honesty and their vulnerability. I think they came to me with what felt like challenging topics, and I said to them it was really important that I heard things that they feel are going well, but also challenges. They were very open and honest about the challenges that they see, and I, again, really appreciate their honesty, and I took to heart the things that they said, and we'll be working with Dr. Goddard and the staff, and a lot of it was around a sort of community, and I've had some differences in terms of maybe my opinions about the 0.8 and 0.9, and that's largely where those people work, 0.8 and 0.9 positions, and they shared how that affected them, and I appreciate that. And then on November 19th, we had our principal learning arc, and so that's our principal time. Our goals that this time was to examine the benefits of inclusion and universal design for learning. So we participate in SEAM Collaborative, as I've shared before. Part of that participation is we share an inclusion coach with several other districts. Her name's Emily Pat. Emily worked with Kristen to prepare for this meeting and came and presented. It was great. It was the principals worked in small groups. It was a really productive session. We analyzed the ways that we use the DCAP in our school communities. We've made some slight changes to the DCAP from what you've seen before, so we'll bring that back at another time. That's the district's accommodation plan. Our goal really this year, which is to continue to help educators use the DCAP in their classroom, to know what supports they have, and then also for our students, and largely I would say maybe middle and high school students, so that you're really aware of the accommodations that you're entitled to within your classroom setting, so that you can advocate for yourself appropriately. And then also just to fortify understanding the benefits of HQMI and how the DCAP and HQMI can work together. I'll go quick. On the 18th, we had a capital improvement meeting with the town manager and all the departments from the town meet together. We presented the items that we wanted to put forth for capital improvement. There was a little bit of overlap through some of the things that we were putting and some that the town was putting forward for us. So Greg Landry, Steve Foster, John Mullen, and Jeremy Brandy will work together tomorrow to consolidate our capital improvement. On the 18th, I went to a select board meeting and largely did the same thing that I did at the finance committee. I attended the Massachusetts Partnership for Youth Conference. It was on liability and fidelity and school assessment and threat assessment. It was a great conference. I learned a lot about threat assessment and how the steps that you take if there's a perceived threat within the school district. So it was really informative. On the 20th of this week, I was able to visit Franklin School. That was really the time that I got to talk to the teachers and visit in the classrooms. I saw lots of wisdom happening. I saw some of the math work that was happening. It happened to be on Wednesday, and so our district calls Wednesday Wacky Wednesday because it's early release. So they slightly have to modify their lessons. But I was able to see small group instruction. I was able to see teacher-led instruction. I was able to see student-to-student instruction. Lots of good things happening at the Franklin School. This week we also had our district professional development. Those two pictures are there from the high school. The high school is continuing to work on their portrait of a learner. Some of the work that the high school staff did is really looking, and I think Ms. Holman talked about this when she was here, thinking about the jobs that we don't even know exist yet and what kind of skills our students need in order to be able to do those jobs. Today, I visited the high school for my listening session. I will say that I didn't have as many visitors as I had at ABECC. I think maybe next time I'll open it up to the students and maybe more people will come and visit me. And then this afternoon, Mr. Brown and I were at the Kittredge building meeting, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit more about that. And then a budget update. So you see today a slightly different version. This also came out of the meeting that I had with the Finance Committee. They had some suggestions for changing the way that we were presenting information to you. And so we worked with Dennis, the town CFO, to create this slightly different chart. So what this chart shows is sort of the revised budget. It shows what we've spent, what we expect to spend, and then either the surplus or the deficit that we have. We've put salaries up top and expenses down the bottom. Some of the things that we have done is because money, like the Title I money and Amazon money, are money that we know we have and we know what we're committing to that, we've rolled that into the budget now as money that the funds that we already have. So what you see here is we are projecting, so now you have the whole year projection. So we continue to project a deficit in terms of our salaries, which is about 2.2 million. And then in terms of our expenses, we have some surplus, but the deficit is larger than the surplus. So we are expecting a deficit of 654,000 with a grand total of a deficit of 2.8 million, almost 2.9 million, which is what we've been saying, somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 million. At the bottom, so remember now, so the federal funds, the Title I funds, the Amazon money has already been put into the budget. So at the bottom, what you see is other potential funding sources to sort of close that budget gap. So there is going to be an article to use the Medicaid funds on town meeting. That's 464,000. There is an ARPA funding request that's going to go forward at town meeting. That's 750,000. The town manager is going to ask the finance committee, or I'll go to ask the finance committee to use the finance committee reserve fund of 100,000. As you know, that's 1.5 million, but really feels, and I agree, that has to keep that other $500,000. We don't know the overtime. We still for the brush fires and what we might need. And then there's still a little bit of money left in the Special Education Stabilization Fund of 65,000. So when you take that into consideration, the adjustment that we're projecting, either a surplus or deficit, but at this point it's still a deficit, is $599,699.
And the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, You said 100,000. It's actually $1 million.
1 million, sorry.
No problem.
Thank you for correcting me.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions from the committee about?
Just a quick question on the top two potential funding sources. So those will have to be the free cash as well as the ARPA funding request. Do those two have to be approved at town meeting in order
Correct.
to get, okay, so, but Finance Committee can make that decision alone?
Finance
Is that
Committee
fine?
will make the decision, and I do believe it goes to town meeting. I know it did last year.
Yeah.
All right, so those top three, those are possible sources, but until the town votes on it, we don't have it yet.
Correct,
Okay.
but when, last time that there was a favorable action
Yeah.
by the, yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
I'm trying to understand what happens next. So I guess we either have to cut $600,000 out of the budget or somebody has to pay it. And I assume there's some sort of discussion and that we would say, if we were to do it, here's what would happen, and is this something that the town wants to do, right? Ultimately, it's not our choice.
Correct. As you remember last year, I think we ended at about negative $540,000, and we were able to work with the town to be able to handle that. We are looking to see if there are things that we will not, that we can either cut now, or funding that we can take away. So for example, our math director, Benjamin Cabrera, has shared with us that he's accepted another position. So he'll be moving on in the beginning of December. So we will not hire that position. So there's a little bit of savings there. Our schools, each of our individual schools have their school budgets, and that we continue to have a freeze on them where they're only spending when they have an essential item. So that might be some money that could be put back. Right now, we consider it to be like encumbered money because they've encumbered their school budgets. There may be some of that, but we are, my understanding is through our work with the town that they're comfortable if we stay within, nobody wants us to stay here, but this is what we're working with, and they understand that we are working with a budget that we didn't create, and there are some things that we aren't able to correct this year. The town is not putting, at this time, the town manager is not putting any spending freeze on her employees. They did that last year, and she's not going to expect them to do that this year.
So I guess it seems to me ideally we would have some sort of dialogue with the Finance Committee and the Select Board in which we say, if we have to do this, here's what would happen. And rather than wait till, this is my first year. I don't know the details of exactly how this happens, but it seems to me it would be nice to have this discussion and some sort of decision by the end of December where it's understood that they don't expect us to close this gap, or they really do.
Feel that's understood. I think what they're asking us to do is to look and see if there are any ways that we can continue to make cuts. I think they're asking us to do just what I said, that if there's an opportunity to not fill a position, and if that being very, very careful with our spending and if there are other ways, once we have other federal funding that comes our way, being able to perhaps put that towards the deficit that we have. But I feel like those are the conversations when I've gone to both finance and school and select board. I feel like that is the understanding that we have.
I'm sure you're right, but I guess I would just feel more comfortable if this was written down somewhere where it was sort of, we asked the question, they gave us an answer. I'm a little uncomfortable just proceeding based on informal discussions. It seems to me this ought to be spelled out.
I guess that's a question that we can, perhaps the chair wants to talk to the town manager about. I feel like these are less than informal and more formal, as the town manager and the chief financial officer, we're working very collaboratively together and presenting to committees. And my feeling from both meetings were that they understand that we have to take care of this deficit, and that they wish we weren't in this predicament this year. But they're trusting that the things that we're doing are going to help us in FY26. And quite honestly, I think that the school committee's efforts and my effort is going to have to be in FY26, because what we know is that we are spending above what we have. And so where we're going to have to make the challenging decisions is really in terms of what we're going to bring forth in FY26, because we won't be able to fund the way that we have been funding this year. We won't be able to run in a deficit then.
Can I add something that might make Mr. Moskovich a little more comfortable? So a big difference from last year to this year is that we're aware of this, all the way at the beginning.
Clearly, right.
Right? It's a very significant difference. Because Superintendent Lathrop meets regularly with town finance, with both the town accountant and the CFO, or I forget what we call her.
Yep,
but
CFO.
Yeah, the CFO. So there, I understand where you're coming from, but this is not going to be a surprise to anybody anymore, right? This is not a surprise. So I think what you're uncomfortable with is if we don't want to get to May and then suddenly realize that nobody's picking up the $5.99, right? And it's essentially what you're saying,
Well,
right?
it's infinitely better than last year. I guess I feel as a member that it's our responsibility to be able, much as we would like not to do it, that if the town isn't going to do this, then it's our responsibility to live within the budget. If they are, I think that's probably a rational decision. They probably understand that the consequences for the schools are something they don't really want.
Mm-hmm.
But it just, I would feel much more comfortable if that were explicit.
I think perhaps a way to address this, right? So, I think the issue is that, on the working level with you and town manager, you guys understand each other, et cetera. I think for us, we'd probably feel better if we heard, if we were certain they felt that way, right? And when I guess what
So you could watch the finance committee meeting and
That's
watch
true.
the select board meeting. I walked away from there feeling as though that they are partners with us in this, and that they are supporting where we are this year, and that while nobody loves this, they feel as though and just like you said, Mr. Brown, that we are keeping the deficit to the minimum, to the best that we can. We're not just letting spending go.
Right, and you're regularly updating the town side, right? So the finance committee and the select board and the town manager are getting regular updates on this.
And they feel very confident about the numbers. So Dennis and Tracy have met, they compared, and they came up with the same thing, which is really great.
Thank you. I also think we should keep in mind that the town knows the timeline of events, and if they would want us to make any changes for this year, that would need to be sooner than later. And I'm sure they will communicate that in due time if necessary. The amount of times that they are talking with each other, I think, is giving me some ease. So, thank you.
Just a quick question, if I could, though. What you mentioned earlier, Superintendent Lathrop, you mentioned earlier that as part of your conversation with the Finance Committee, I think it was, you said that you mentioned something about timing, reduction timing. I didn't quite catch it. Did I mishear you, maybe? Something about, I couldn't, it just went by too fast.
What I think I said was that when I'm meeting, what I shared with both the finance and the select board, and what we're doing right now is meeting with to Mr. Moskovich's point, meeting with the leadership team. We are identifying potential cuts. We are also identifying what the impact of those cuts would be, and whether or not we could make the cut now, if that was and we're still working that out, to be honest with you, with the town. If we were needed to make the cut now, but if this grows bigger, or if there's more of an issue, could we make it now? Or is it a cut that we're saying we really can't make it now, but we feel that would be something that we're going to put forward for FY26,
Okay. Yeah.
so to take out of the budget.
Okay, so you're kind of pre-planning for different scenarios.
Correct.
Yeah,
So if this is an appropriate time, there's a similar discussion about next year, right?
We need to have once the budget directives are decided, and then
I'm sorry, excuse me, once the what?
Budget directives are decided, so you still have to decide on your budget directives.
Ours or the town's?
Yours as a school
Ours.
committee.
We're going to finish that up tonight.
The town hasn't, Dennis hasn't sent out the budget sheets yet. But we have this pre-meeting, so we started with capital improvements. We've had our capital improvement meeting for the town. We will get our numbers soon from the town manager in terms of what our increase might look like, but we're really largely looking at a level service budget. But for us, we need to understand that that is going to mean cuts,
Right.
sometimes because we're over our own level service. And then the leadership team will work together to present a budget, and we'll have a budget presentation here for you at school committee.
So at some point, I don't know if this is the right year, but this came out of our discussion last week when you were talking about, which I thought went really well. You were talking about big cuts that we could make, not this year, but over 2 or 3 years. And you also talked about things that we don't have that we would need. And at some point, it seems to me, the needs that we need to present to the town, we could say, look, here's what we are comfortable cutting.
I
Here's-
think that's a little bigger conversation. So I just want to state that, like,
Yeah.
this report tonight, my superintendent report, is really just on the state of the budget. I
Well,
think your conversation is a bigger bit of a conversation about the budget, and I just want to be respectful because we have an MCAS presentation, and I really want to make sure
Yeah.
that we have time for that.
Thank you, Superintendent.
So I don't want to, I'm not
Okay.
trying to derail from your questions.
no.
I think they're really important, but I do think it's a little bit of a bigger conversation.
So, Mr. Moskovich, we will have, and we can be involved, we'll somehow be involved in those conversations, but in mid-January, the superintendent and her team will do a presentation, an initial presentation of next year's budget and what that would look like in terms of programs as well. And then we have a public hearing, and then in early February, we will vote on that. It then goes, from then until town meeting, we have that opportunity to talk with the public about why it looks that way, and people can ask questions, and they can participate in the public hearing about the budget or give public comment. So there'll be opportunities to do that then.
But at some, I understand it may be necessary, but in a way, it's sort of backward to have the town give us an amount before we've made a presentation to them about what the choices might be.
Right, it's a suggested amount, and
We have
Correct.
the
we
ability
also
to
have the authority to
Correct.
say
put a
it's not
number in.
enough. Yeah.
Those can be different. In the past, the goal has been to make those two numbers very close, and then there's the consensus and the favorable action is then recommended by all the other committees at town meeting. So and it all makes sense in terms of what the town is doing next. And that's just been the tradition, but doesn't necessarily have to be what
I think-
happens. But we're also going to recognize, I think, that this year we really have to look at what we're spending on, and I think the town manager will give us a number that is pretty accurate and fair of what we need to be at. That's my guess. But we'll have our tri-board meeting in a couple weeks where we get that presentation about expected revenues for the entire town, what her outlook for the next 5 or 10 years is, what the numbers are going to look like, and so we'll get some of that information on December
Right,
13th.
15th, I think.
15th. Yeah, so at that tri-board meeting, that's when we get that information.
But it's important that they tell us what they think is available. It's also important that we have an opportunity to say,
Yep.
in the long run, is this enough? And if it isn't enough, why isn't it?
Yes,
And you will.
we will. Thank you, Superintendent. The chair is not here tonight, so we don't have a chair update. We're going to move on to building committee updates, and that's me for the first one, and then we'll hear from Mr. Brown about the Kittredge. Thank you again to Mr. Gonzalez and his team of students that gave us that wonderful tour last week. Things are moving along. There's been some change in where students are located in the building since earlier this month. The 8th graders are now in the new wing. The 7th graders have moved from the back of the building to the front of the building, and the 6th graders are still over in the Sims area. And the RAs are now in the back of the building where the 7th graders previously were. It seemed like a bad idea to have one long hallway of 2 grades right next to each other. That would be a lot of congestion. But moving on to what was happened last week up to the 15th, electrical is in the auditorium getting ready for our new ADA lift. They're Working on the lighting, and the new lighting is being roughed in. The curtains are getting, the equipment's being mobilized. The rods for the lighting and curtains have been installed. The lift install has been completed, and the state inspection has been scheduled. And they're doing some caulking of all exterior existing windows, and that continues throughout. We're still looking at. We haven't had a meeting this week, but we'll have one next week. As far as I know, we're still early and under budget.
They get nervous when Mr. Hicks says that.
That's I'm knock on
Yeah.
wood.
It's a mantra. That's your mantra, right?
And in full transparency, if we are under budget, the money goes back to the town general fund to be used in other ways. So, and right now it's at about $352,000. So
Cool.
Back some of what was taken.
that is not a small amount of money.
All right.
Moving on, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. So for Kittredge, we met today, and there's a lot of work going on that's maybe not obvious to the public. So what I thought I would do today is show the sort of high-level schedule for what's going on here. And so what you have on the left are like sort of milestones, all with the goal of getting the Mass State Building Authority to approve this project, right, and provide us with something between 40 and 50% of the money for it. So along the way, you have what we're working on now is what they call the schematic. It's part of the PSR, and that goes all the way through the end of February, and then you see all these dots represent different stakeholder meetings along the way, right? Most of the community stuff happened kind of previously to this, so what the phase we're in now is gathering input from all the stakeholders in the school community, the staff and so on. And then that's what those working groups are. The SBC, the pink meetings are our committee meetings. The blue ones are the small group input, all with the goal, as Ms. Lathrop said, about having a community meeting on December 4th. Now, that's anyone who's truly interested in this should plan to attend that. It'll be held at the existing school in the gym, I imagine, because that's the only place you can put a lot of people. And we were working today on what we're going to present, what's going to be presented there. And it's going to be a milestone meeting, and the idea is to get feedback from the community on the ideas being generated here, what the different alternatives are, get their input, and then as a building committee, we're going to submit our final recommendation, right? And that goes, we select that preferred alternative January 21st. The architects and the owner project manager put it all together into a submission that will be due on, our committee has to approve that submission February 14th, then gets submitted to MSBA, as you see towards the bottom there, February 27th, and then we look for they have a set of meetings, and then we look for their approval by April 23rd. And I think that pretty much is the whole picture, but this is a good way to look at it. That's why I wanted to bring this to the committee's attention and the community, so they can kind of see the schedule we're marching towards.
Do we then start putting together what happens then next in terms of town meeting and requests for funds? Is that
Right, so
next year, the following town meeting?
Yes, it's the following town meeting where North Andover would have to vote to go forward.
Yeah.
Right, under the conditions where MSBA puts in X, we have to pay the cost minus X.
So the town would vote on the appropriation of those funds in May of 26, and hopefully some type of construction could start on July 1 of 26.
I believe that's.
Oh, doesn't that require an override? A capital
not,
override?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, I understand, but
Yeah. This one,
it's a hunk of money that go.
and we'll hear about this at the
At the
Tribe-
community forum, so what
Yeah.
what you'll see at the community forum is the several different options that the committee's looking at. So as Mr. Brown said, we really would encourage community members to come to see how the property would be used. There are options in terms of either using some of the existing structure or a new build, and then what will show what, sort of depending on that, depends on what the MSBC, what the state funding is and what the town funding is.
and the town is, as part of facilities master plan too, has a
Right.
plan about like how these things get paid for over time, and this one did not, was within available funds.
Part of it. I mean, this
Part of it was.
this is part of.
Yeah, this one did not
facilities.
require an override of things. I
Right.
don't believe. I could be wrong on that, but the town manager will review that with us on the December.
Master's
16th
facilities
tri-board
plans
meeting.
too, so there'll be some adjustments to that because of where Kittredge was, so
Yeah.
that will, Kittredge moved down a little bit, so a few things have moved up, and then we'll be also looking at some of the things that we have there in terms of some of the other schools and whether or not some of the expansion that maybe had been part of that whether or not that's needed.
Right. So in other words, to summarize, it's been in the town manager's facilities planning for a long time. This
Right,
already there,
okay.
right?
But-
And when Ms. Lathrop said it went down, she means that the timing slipped out a bit, right? Because it was originally going to be earlier,
Correct.
right? And now it'll be a little bit later because in order to get the state funding, we had to delay it, basically. So therefore, some other capital projects were moved earlier. And
So-
just one more thing, the PSR, because people don't know what that means. Program schematic review, I believe is what it stands for.
Preferred schematic.
Preferred
report.
schematic report, that's it, thank you. There it is, it's right there. Cheater. But yes, thank you, preferred schematic report. Just look at the slide, Dave. That's what it means. But the idea, what they mean by schematic is it's sort of like a diagram of all the resources in the building, is basically what that is. And, it's like moving this block and around, and we're going to have so many classrooms and so many bathrooms and et cetera, that kind of thing.
So, again, going back to our discussion last week, it seemed to me that either there or sometime recently, you mentioned two things that struck me. One was that our enrollment projections are a little lower than they were before. And then we talked about we have some schools where we have very small classes, and that's partly because it's a very small school. And so I wonder whether we should go back, at least look whether, if enrollment, do we need this, or how will we adjust all of the buildings?
So
In
when
light of all
Kittredge
that.
comes online, so when this I think we need it. If
We do.
you've been in Kittredge School, it is a very old building. We're using spaces creatively, but not necessarily appropriately. Not that it's not inappropriate, but they've been creative with their space. But it's a building that needs to be corrected. But once that school goes online, and actually maybe even before it goes online, as we start to look at our budget for next year, we will evaluate the enrollment at all of our schools. And there may be a time to talk about adjustment of neighborhood schools. But, I want to just be cautious. I don't want to make the community nervous. Being part of a school community is very important, and we wouldn't do anything rash in terms of moving students from one school to another school. We would make sure our community was very aware if there are things that we need to do, but we will be looking in the next few weeks very closely at our enrollment and trying to make the best determination so that we are, within the school committee's guidelines for class size.
Is that something that at some future meeting you can sort of lay out what you think enrollment would be and how much
That would
how much
be, I
capacity
believe,
we have?
probably part of the budget process as we
Yep.
think about like staffing that we might need for next year.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our presentations. Ms. Lathrop, we're going to hear about the MCAS tonight. Could you,
I'd love
Ms.
to.
Larcombe, would you happily
Int-
join us up here? And Ms. Lathrop, would you introduce all of our
I will.
presenters?
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ando, and she's largely presenting. She and Kara Larkham are going to share with you some of our MCAS results from this year.
Excellent. Good evening. You know Kara. She's been here with me before. She is my STEM director and data guru here in central office. And so I will give you most of the results, and Kara will be here to support and explain things as well. And so,
Clarifying question or procedural question, would you prefer us to wait for questions till the very, very end?
I would love that. Thank you for your question about questions.
No problem.
That's amazing.
So I kind of ask the committee to respect that, and we'll write your questions down as we go, and we'll make sure we get to them as much as possible at the end.
Excellent. That will also help us sort of preserve the information that we then add later to our parent portal, and so add this available later. Thank you. All right, my friends, MCAS results for spring of 2024. So presentation tonight has two parts. Both parts are about the spring of 2024 MCAS, but one is our overall MCAS results for the entire district, all schools, and as Ms. Lathrop mentioned before, we had our individual schools find bright spots in the school and district profile data, and we are going to share that with you tonight. It would be a 3-day presentation if I shared with you all the data about all the schools, but the idea that we had our principals in our leadership teams look for bright spots. Of course, as Ms. Lathrop said, we found areas of strength and areas for growth, and so I am working individually with each principal to analyze the data and do its best for each individual building. So overall, here are our achievement levels. I'm going to talk to you tonight, and Kara and I are going to talk to you tonight about achievement and growth. Here are achievement levels for ELA. You'll see 3 to 8, grades 3 to 8 North Andover in the top compared to the state, grade 10 North Andover compared to the state. Overall, we are above the state average, but we are also consistent with the state in that our ELA achievement levels are struggling to recover post-COVID or post-pandemic. The students who are now sitting in our third grade classrooms were in pre-K or kindergarten when we were not in school, and we are feeling the effects of that. And so, although we exceed state averages, we have a long way to go and some recovery to do. Here we are broken down by grade level, starting with grade 3. All the way through grade 10. As you can see, our percentages of students exceeding or meeting. We're hovering at about 50% at most grade levels. Partially meeting and not meeting, you can see as well. In math, we are also consistent with the state in that the state as a whole is recovering more quickly in math post-pandemic. Here we are with our averages compared to the state averages in grades 3 to 10 at the top. Grade 3 to 8 at the top. Grade 10 at the bottom. So those are overall achievement levels. And here we are, math achievement by grade. As you can see, most of our math achievement levels are sort of the meeting and exceeding is over that 50% line as compared to ELA. Here's our science achievement by grade level. We give the science assessment in 3 grades, grade 5, grade 8, and then most students take biology in grade 9. And so there you are. You can see us, North Andover, compared to the state in those averages as well. Kara's going to talk to a little bit about growth over time.
All right.
Thanks.
So the student growth percentile looks at students and how they performed in MCAS, and then how they did compared to their peers that started at a similar point. So you'll notice along the bottom, this is only measured in grades 4 through 10 because you need a 3rd grade score in MCAS in order to get a growth score in 4th grade. And so a little bit different than the achievement score. And so what we put together is actually the average student growth percentile in both ELA on the left and math on the right in the last 3 years. So it's something, and we're tracking data over time to see how students are doing. In the shaded area, you'll see that there is kind of low growth is considered under the 39th percentile. Typical growth is between 40 and 59th percentile, so you can kind of see that green bar. And then high growth is above the 60th percentile. And of course, we have the extremes on the very high or very low side. So you'll notice across both the math and ELA, most of our average student growth percentile is in that typical growth. I'll point out that 7th grade, we have some groups that have been higher than typical growth. They're falling in that high growth range. And that continues to be the case, especially across our math in 7th grade. One thing we've talked a little bit about that kind of projection over time, where are kids sitting and where is their progress? So if you look at, I'm going to use the math, Paul on my STEM side. So if we look at the 4th grade gray bar, so our students in 4th grade in the spring of 2022, thanks, Kristen and Joa, that group had an average student growth percentile in math of the 53rd percentile. And if we follow that to 5th grade, they're the black bar, and they were in the 48th. So when we're looking across one clump in that 5th grade, you'd see 57, 48, 48. We really want to look across the 3 different grades to kind of see that same group over time. So that same group had, some great growth in 5th grade, 48, and then there were 46 in 6th grade. So a lot of the data work is messy, and we had a great conversation with Mr. Moskovich last week too of, how are we looking to track our students, not just, how did 7th grade do each year, but also how are we doing with those groups of students, because we know each group of student is very unique. And so we want to look at that growth in lots of different ways.
I think I'm sorry. I'm not going to ask a question. It's just,
We can get back to this when we go
I think
through.
that went past fairly quickly.
Yes.
So the gray group in 2022 are the same students as the black group?
Microphone, sir.
Oh,
Gotta use your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
yep, so the
That's what-
gray.
The gray in 4th grade are the black, and so that is actually the same cohort.
The same cohort of students. Mm-hmm.
Right. Somebody decided to have a growth measure that was almost impossible to explain, and succeeded.
Thank you. So overall, our accountability report, so overall as a district, we have 41%. We have moderate progress toward targets, and so the state classifies that as moderate progress, and then all of our schools not requiring assistance or intervention. You'll see there that Ann Bradstreet has insufficient data because no one at the Ann Bradstreet takes any of the MCAS. And so you can see, but we are none of our schools require assistance or intervention from the state level. On the right-hand side there, you can see our school accountability percentiles, and I do have them later in later slides. Here we go. Here are our school accountability percentiles and our progress toward targets over time. So starting at 2018, going to 2024, and you'll see the percentage of progress towards targets. Some schools are moderate. We have 3 schools that are substantial, and the other 4. And so you'll see down at the bottom, below 25% is limited or no progress towards targets, 25 to 49% moderate progress, 50 to 74 substantial progress, and 75 or higher meeting or exceeding targets. So you can see us broken down by school over time with our accountability percentiles. Kara, what am I missing?
I'd say the target piece is also messy. I like to take the messy questions. But the state looks at how students did on MCAS and groups of students, and then sets individual targets. There's also 2 different paths of whether they're in a recovery path or a path forward, depending on how they're going. So if someone to look at all of the detail on the DESI report card and the accountability measures, there's individual targets. And so that's what we're looking at, is how many of those targets that they set for us were we able to meet for different groups.
Another measure other than this, there are measures around achievement and measures around growth. Another one is participation in advanced coursework, where we measure in grades 11 and 12. And so you'll see here our rate in 2023 versus our rate in 2024. And this is one place where we improved below target in all of our subgroups. And so it's another way that the DESE measures us as far as our how many students are enrolled in courses that are advanced placement or math courses above Algebra 2. And then moving on to the bright spots. Again, to be completely transparent, the state is not exactly where we'd like it to be. As you can see, the percentages, we have some recovery to do. The reason I worked with the principals around identifying the bright spots in collaboration, full leadership team, principal PD, principals will work with their teachers in upcoming data meetings this year about meeting student needs, how to best meet the needs of students in schools. And so I'm going to show you a sprinkling of bright spots. There were more, and we're doing a tremendous amount more work with the data. But as far as, we're going to show you one bright spot from each school. The bright spots were pulled from the school and district profiles. So the school and district profiles, there's overall results, student group results, and detailed data for each indicator. So our overall results are the overall indicators for achievement and growth. Student group results are broken down by subgroup, and then detailed data for each indicator is growth for ELA and math. And so you'll see across the different schools that different schools had different bright spots depending on the category. Atkinson, so what you'll see is the state has measures. They measure all students, and they also measure a lowest performing student group. I wish they would call it something else, but the lowest performing student group. And I think the reason this is done, and Kara can correct me if I'm wrong, is so that our lowest students don't get lost in our aggregate, if that makes sense. So the idea that we're paying attention to our students who may have our highest needs. In 2023, the lowest performing students met 53% of their targets. And in 2024, they met 71% of their targets. And so that was a bright spot at the Atkinson School. The lowest performing students, LPS, maintained or increased scores in possible growth points, chronic absenteeism, and total possible points for growth in mathematics. And so this was one group. So Ms. O'Loughlin and I are looking closely at this group of students and what might be working for these students and what other data points we can collect and how we can take the success and what they've learned over to our aggregate as well. The Thompson had overall progress, had a lot of growth overall. So in absolute overall progress toward improvement targets increased from 65% to 79%, and they made substantial progress towards targets. So that would lead you to that in most subgroups that the Thompson made overall progress toward their targets, that students generally did better between 2023 and 2024. At the Sargent, we had similar data that the percentage of possible points for all students rose from 15% in 2023 to 65% in 2024, and possible points for their lowest performing students rose from 67% to 76%. So both groups, all students, or the aggregate, and the lowest performing students at the Sargent, made gains between 2023 and 2024. At the Franklin, we had talked earlier about how there are different measures. One measure that the state uses to track our progress, and Ms. Lathrop mentioned it earlier, was about chronic absenteeism. Franklin was a place where we exceeded our targets or improved below targets in chronic absenteeism. High need students and students with disabilities exceeded their targets, in that we reduced the number of students who are chronically absent. At the Kittredge, we had our lowest performing students earn 3 out of 4 points in both ELA and mathematics. And so again, like all of those, the idea that these growth targets, they earned 3 out of 4 points in their growth targets. At the middle school, we had, so one bright spot for the middle school was in mathematics growth. And what you'll see is that we have typical growth high in mathematics in our lowest performing, low income, Black, and multi-race subgroups, and then typical growth low and high needs. So as Kara said earlier, that range of growth levels, we had typical growth on the high range for some of our subgroups and typical growth in the low range for others. At North Andover High, we looked at the growth data in ELA, and that we had some subgroups, lowest performing, high needs, and low income students, all make typical growth in the high range at our North Andover High School level. Again, we have some bright spots, but overall, we have a lot of work to do. And so I just wanted to remind us all of our goals. And so our first one, shockingly, is around high quality instructional materials. We have our multi-tiered systems of support. And then we have our budgeting and what do we need and how do we best support our schools. And so that is an introduction to our MCAS. And if you have questions for me, Karen and I will be happy to take them.
Thank you, Ms. Ando.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll open up to questions. We'll start. We'll go around We're going to start with Ms. Cormier this time. I feel like you always get it at the end. So we're going to start this way this time.
All right. So, thank you for presenting the information. Thank you. Putting it all together. I have a question on slide 10, which looked at the accountability percentages and broke it out by the different schools that we have, the elementary schools. And I realize this is looking at things in the aggregate, so looking at very compiled scores. But I was just wondering if this tells you anything, seeing the very different scores. You're just looking at 2024, the very different scores from elementary schools. Is there anything that you see looking at this, or that you've started diving down into different data where we can see things that are happening in one school? I mean, I don't know, does the data show that there's something happening in one school that we need to carry over? I don't know. What is, does this tell you anything? And if it does, what does it tell you?
It tells us a lot of things, but absolutely. But the idea that, like, of course, like, we're looking at the Atkinson School, and to go from a 51 percentile to a 35 percentile, but then, like, diving into the data, we could take a look at, like, the lowest performing group is doing well, and what's happening with those particular students that we can shift over. In other schools, we have the opposite, where the aggregate might be doing really well, and the lowest performing students are struggling, because they average these two together. Each group is worth 50% of the overall score. And so absolutely, yes, we're using these of course, every school is different, but the idea that we're using these comparisons to then look and see, what we're trying to do is that you'll see at the Sargent and the Thompson, our accountability percentiles went up in both of those places. So we're digging deeply into those places to try to figure out, like, what went well. Kara today was pulling lists and sheets of students with their DIBEL scores, their MAP data, and their MCAS data from last year, so that we can sit with teachers and think, are we all, you know what I mean, here are the students. They might be showing some indication of struggling. What supports do we have in place? Where are they during their win block? What kind of instruction do they have? And so absolutely, we're trying to answer all of those questions.
One of the pieces that's tricky from DESE is we don't get that kind of predicted list of who are they tagging as the students in the lowest percentage until springtime sometime. So what I was working on, as Ms. Anna said, is pulling what our data is with our current 4th and 5th graders, and then 6, 7, 8, and kind of ranking them, literally kind of figuring out who is that lowest 25 percentile, so we can really make sure that we're addressing we want to address everybody's needs, but really, are those students being supported? What's going on? And then, because we don't have MCAS data for our younger grades, looking at the MAP data and the DIBELS data and kind of doing that same piece. Also looking to see, is it consistent across those different data points? So kind of triangulating the data to really see where we're at. And then, as Krista mentioned, the principals are working with the teachers in the next few weeks, actually, to look at that data and identify what we're doing to support students.
And last year was the first full reporting, I believe, since MCAS. And it was when it's when they went to the points and the targets. So I'm trying to see how I want to say this. What was set for us, not that it was easier to achieve it last year, but it was the first sort of full reporting of MCAS since we have come back from COVID. And so based on last year's information is how they set the new targets, which could make this year slightly more challenging because you're sort of working within that sort of new system. So it is it's hard sometimes to see the dip, but sort of remembering that this year's targets were based on last year's. So it's really kind of hard to look back. Yes.
Draw too many conclusions from this without understanding more of what's going on.
Yeah, but I think Kristen said it really well at the end when she went over the goals and reminding, and especially about budget. And I think these are things that Mr. Moskovich has been saying as we think about our budget moving forward. We need to be mindful of the fact that we have some gaps and we have some issues, and that should affect our budgeting, and that perhaps, based on what we see here, it will also affect sort of where you have to put your attention sometimes.
But it's you make a great point, like NAMS and Franklin have the same accountability percentile, and the data is radically different as far as like achievement levels, growth levels, like how that's distributed.
Thank you. That was our question.
Thank you.
Mr. Moskovich.
So I seem to remember reading in the Globe that there was this argument going on between the superintendents and DESE about something that might be accountability levels, which had to do with what percentage of the distance between where you were now and where you were before the pandemic have you closed. And this got pretty heated, and I just thought at the time that, you know, if your goal is to have something so complex that virtually nobody understands it, then they're doing pretty well. And why where you were before is necessarily, I mean, but I wasn't even sure when you said they have achieved X percent of something called accountability. What is accountability? And is it the right, I don't know, maybe it isn't even worth going, but that is what we're talking about?
So-
And it's got really heated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, if it were me, I'd just say that, you know, if kids are not performing well in kindergarten, then the idea is to help them to perform better 2 or 3 years later. And it's actually possible to get systems that are really much easier to understand. And Kara, what you talked about at the end, that struck me as just right, where you said,
I think too, again, yeah, where's that achievement, where's the growth, that when we get into this minutia sometimes it can get frustrating, I think, when we're looking at that data, to your point of.
Once upon a
it's
time,
messy.
I'm sorry, the then governor wanted to make Lawrence look really good, and so it turned out that their growth scores, their fourth grade growth scores were very high. And it didn't feel right to me. And so I actually went into the data and I looked at all the growth scores all across the state. And what I figured out was that the reason that Lawrence had really high growth scores is because they did a really lousy job in third grade. And so their fourth grade scores were not very impressive, but they grew a lot from third grade. And I mean, the moral for the story is, you know, don't work really hard in the elementary grades, you're just hurting yourself. Just
It's not the moral of the story.
defies any kind of logic.
That's the anti-moral of the story.
Yeah.
The anti-moral.
But
Mr. Moskowitz, do you have?
I think you bring up great points, Mr. Moskowitz, in that, like, it is a data point, and it's not something we want to ignore, and it's not something we want to, but it's a data point, and it's important information, and we use it the best we can, and that there's lots of other ways to collect information about kids.
Fortunately, you have individual MCAS scores, and we all have access to individual scores statewide, not names, of course, but if we start doing analysis about how students move, we can actually compare them with statewide averages. It seems to me there are ways of looking at this that are actually easier to understand and that makes more sense. That, yes, I mean, this is what the state looks at, but I mean,
Yeah.
we can set more realistic goals for ourselves, I think.
Any other questions, sir, for our presenters?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
I just have a couple, but so let me see. When I was going to ask for the definition of growth and the definition of accountability, like what are they measuring here? So I think I heard you say, tell me if I'm right, that growth is simply how much better the one group did than the year before in the same measurement?
That same, so a student is kind of grouped with a like peer group, and then they're compared relative to each other. So it's a little different than just where were you here and where were you the next year, because they're looking at that student.
So
groups,
did
yes.
these groups of students from last year are all sort of the same? This is how they did, and then you look at how much better did they get, and did this individual student get as good as that peer group did the following year?
I can give you a technical definition, actually. So in the MCAS file, the MCAS files are individual student files, and they're longitudinal. And so in any given fourth grade student's MCAS file, is his or her third grade score. And so what they do is they take, for each third grade score level, they take all the students in the state that scored at that level. And then in your district, you take your, I was about to say this was simple, but I guess it isn't.
You said technical.
You take the fourth grade score of each student and you compare it to the third grade scores of all the students in the state that had exactly the same third grade score. And if your fourth graders are doing better,
I see.
in each individual student is doing better, more better, sorry for my grammar, than statewide, then you have a gross score higher than 50%.
Okay, wow.
Does that answer your
Actually,
question?
I did kind of follow that. I think I have an idea. So then, like, maybe more important question well, I was going to ask the same thing about accountability, but before I do, maybe the most important question is this. When you measure with other means, like Dibbles and MAP, are you seeing similar numbers or different? Meaning, like, do you feel that these measures, as complex as they may be, are doing a fair job or a bad job or a good job?
I think we've seen some consistency between how students are scoring on the MAP assessment and MCAS. When we get student by student, there's some
Sure.
discrepancies
No, but
between,
as a
but I
group.
think as a group, I think the trends seem to be that way. I haven't dug deep into the comparison yet for these because we're diving more into the MCAS first, but
Okay.
I think overall, yes, I think there's a pretty good correlation most of the time. When teachers pull up their MAP data, there is actually a kind of projection. There is a way to look at that, what they project. So a student's fall MAP score, where do they project they're going to be? We often, I've gone into classrooms of teachers in the winter and they go, oh, it's changed. You know, my outcome didn't look so good in the fall MAP score, but wow, it's really, I can see that, you know, student growth is occurring from fall to winter MAP. And that projection. And I think they feel that it's a pretty accurate measure and really helpful to them fall, winter to kind of see that trend. So they're not waiting till the next fall to see MCAS scores.
Okay. And then I guess the only other question I have is how did they define back to that accountability slide 10? How do they define accountability? That's how do you measure that?
Lots of ways.
Or how do
That's
they
for
measure
all
it?
those little, Kristen, if you go back to that slide, yep. So all of those individual indicators, yep, of how did they do, what was their average scaled score on math MCAS and ELA MCAS. So all of those different groups, they look at how they did and award points. And so it's their MCAS, their math, ELA, science achievement, their growth in ELA and math. We don't do a growth in science because it's too spread out. But even their chronic absenteeism, what's our rate of
that's part of the
absenteeism
soup.
is part of the soup of the accountability,
Okay.
as is the advanced coursework. Even the percent of students who take the MCAS is like an accountability measure. We're very high.
So it's an attempt. I'm sorry. So it's an
There's
attempt
lots of-
to kind of come up with a single measure that represents all of these things. Okay.
Yep.
I like that soup analogy, yeah.
And then, yes, and then the,
In each of these things, you get points, and then it adds up to a total.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's weighted, and yeah.
So it's a composite score of sort of disparate things to try to give you one number. At the
One
end.
number that you can look at
Yeah.
and compare yourselves to.
Sure.
Your one number is weighted 60% of your data
God.
from this year, 40% of your data from last year. So if you have a, quote, good year or a bad year, it's weighted against the score. So our scores from 2024 are worth 60% of that number. Our scores from 2023 are worth 40%.
of that number, and that map is what's followed right there. Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. That's it. I'm good. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Were you going to add something?
I was just going to remind you, everybody, that this is public information. So this is our DESE school profile. So you can, any community member can look us up on DESE school profile, and you'll see this exact if you want to dive into it a little bit deeper. And then we also will receive our school report cards, which usually come out January-ish. I think, and then we'll send those home to families as well.
Thank you.
And if you click on these other tabs, you get even more fun stuff to look at.
Okay.
But that's all public
That's all.
information.
We pulled everything from public information.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have a few. Sorry, I'm looking at time, but going to the science results. Right now, we use bio in the 9th grade. Do we still believe that that is the best one to use versus the physics?
Good question.
Because I just feel like, I'm just going to throw it out there, our math scores seem to be doing well, and physics is a little bit more mathy versus the bio. I know is like a lot of technical language around and like harder in terms of you need more ELA skills to do better with bio.
That's why I was a physical scientist, because I liked the math piece better. I think so historically, I'm going to go way back. We used to do earth science as freshmen and bio as sophomore, and then students took chemistry, and then senior year was kind of where they got choices in what science to take. And we've always had about a third of the students take physics. So it hasn't been a major push. We have a lot of students that gravitate towards anatomy and physiology. We have bioethics. We have a wide range of options. When the MCAS became a competency determination, the decision was made that there wasn't an earth science version. And so it was, let's do the biology. And I can't even remember, it's been a while, that was kind of the route we took. It was at the time it was biology, there were some chemistry. So I taught chemistry at the time. We had a couple kids move into the district and take chemistry as sophomores and go take that MCAS. And that was, the state actually has removed that. It's not an option anymore. They weren't finding a lot of districts were going for chemistry, and because of the math component, it tended to be a little bit trickier. So there are districts that do physics first and kind of kick off the curriculum that way. It just historically isn't the way that we've gone. It's something we can reevaluate and kind of look and see. We tend to have a pretty high passing rate, and I think that's something to look at too. Yeah. Even the kids in the yellow in that partially meeting earn the competency determination. So we have a handful. It's, I think, under about 10 students this year that did not pass it on their first attempt as freshmen. So I think there's a lot of love in the life sciences in our science department at the high school. So I think it's a very comfortable point. We have a lot of, I think a challenge might be if we were to move to physics first. We have, I believe, 2 teachers that are certified in physics, where we have about 6, I think, in biology. So that would, have a big impact on our staffing as well. But something,
it could still be the right decision, right? And that's good.
Great question.
And we know in high school, in the sciences, you're certified by subject area, unlike us history folks who are just history teachers. I am qualified to teach economics. Thank you. And you define what it means to pass. People use that for pass MCAS. It's the blues, the greens, and the yellows on the chart, not just the blues and the greens. I think that's an important thing for folks. And then my last one is on the one with advanced coursework. There we go. And maybe this could be something that we hear later at a different presentation, but I'd like to know, I know we have the calculus project happening to help kids get to that in mathematics and to reach that level. What other strategies are we using to encourage more and more kids to see themselves as AP or advanced course capable and to jump in and try it out? Because in some of those, it's still a little low where we would want to be, according to the state.
Increase, yeah. Good question. I know one piece that was brought up last year when we were looking at this data in particular was, have we coded all the courses correctly, in PowerSchool? Do we miss a course? Is there something like that? So we did kind of look through. The majority of our points in 11th, 12th are for math, because there's a wider spread of students from Algebra 2 and up in coursework. Our Project Lead the Way computer science courses also are designated as advanced coursework. So we've really, we've increased those offerings. So we have some more computer science that we didn't have a couple years ago. I think there are some history, Kristen, correct me, I think there's some AP history, social studies, I don't know exactly which of the AP that are actually 10th graders take. So that's challenging too, because this is only looking at 11th and 12th graders. So even if we look at those numbers, who are those students and are they continuing on? I'm working with the math department, looking at that progression. Right now, we've had a lot of students double up in math courses in their sophomore year to kind of make some work. The progress we've made at the middle school has increased. We have more students taking algebra this year than we did last year. So we're hopeful that that's going to continue. And looking at the pathways, if a student is finding success in 8th grade math, how can we make sure that they're moving along and getting access in that work? So I'd say a lot of the courses that actually fall in this designation happen to be math. You can actually earn a lot of points and a lot of, you can kind of diversify how many students versus maybe 1 or 2 AP English or social studies courses that are offered. But
It certainly is a measure that
reveals.
reveals some opportunity gaps that we're looking into, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's all I had. So thank you so much both for the presentation and for sharing with us where we are and the bright spots and some of the plans that we have going forward to do better for our kids. We don't have any operations, so we're moving on to continued business from previous meetings. And our first up is a overnight field trip request for England and Scotland. We heard this presentation last week, correct?
Yes.
Not last week, two weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
At our last televised meeting. So this would be for,
Looking for my thing. I'm lost here.
they would be looking for some action tonight and approval.
I have a question. No one will be surprised by my question. So one of the items that gets answered on the document is what plans are being made to cover classes while teachers are traveling? And the answer is building substitutes.
Sorry, say that again.
So what, sorry, I wasn't in my microphone.
No, it just went too fast, or I was understanding too slowly.
Anything's possible at this point in the evening. So just looking at the overnight trip approval form that was filled out for the England and Scotland trip, one of the standard questions that's always on here and answered is what plans are being made to cover classes while teachers are traveling? And the answer is building substitutes. So my question is just, when it's building substitutes, do we know how many, how often, and what's the cost?
Correct. Yep. So typically, the form will tell you how many staff members are going on the trip if it's a school time. I don't seem to have that one in front. Is this England, Scotland?
Yeah, England,
Yes.
Scotland, yeah.
Does he have how many substitutes?
Just says building substitutes.
Okay.
I
thought he said he was, the cost of the chaperones built in the trip, the chaperones are a 6-to-1 ratio. So for every 6 students that go, you would need 1 chaperone. So I'm not sure how many are going. Does he say how many students are going? Approximately 30.
So but are the chaperones all teachers? So it's
Not
5 substitutes?
necessarily. If a teacher is out, the cost of a substitute is $100 a day.
Okay.
And there's only one day, that looks like it's going to be
this
missed.
is only a one-day missed school, this
Okay.
particular one.
So I think it's just one of those, I would say, as
Absolutely.
we kind of build
Yeah,
that.
something to think
that
about.
Yes.
fiscal awareness of all of us. I
Yep.
think it's just, certainly, this
Yes.
is worthwhile for these things, but just that all of us build that fiscal awareness,
Yep.
that
Good
maybe
point.
that's a change to the trip, just, what is the cost? It's just,
Mm-hmm.
what are the plans and what's the cost? So make sure that it gets budgeted, right? Because that should be part of what the
Absolutely.
principal needs to budget for. How would they know if they
That
don't
would
see
be part of
number?
the principal's substitution budget
So
line
it's-
item, but just sort of within their purview.
Here's I don't know if it's an appropriate question or a silly question. If the teacher is going to be there because they're traveling and it's a school chaperone thing, do they then put in for a sick day? Is that, maybe that's irrelevant.
Professional day?
It's a professional
Professional
day
day.
if they're
Mhm.
traveling with the
Okay.
group.
Thank you. That's fine. Any other questions for our England-Scotland trip? If not, the chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we approve this England-Scotland trip as presented in the packet.
Seconded?
Thank you. Any more discussion, questions? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Mr. Moskovich,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes?
Ms. Cormier?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, or Vice Chair votes yes. Moving on to superintendent goals. It is, before we go to you, Ms. Lathrop, because this might take long, I just want to remind those who are watching, it's right now 8:51. At 9 o'clock, we will, or thereabouts, we might lose the live feed, but it is going to still continue to be recorded and will be accessible on NACAM soon. So.
Very good. Maybe this won't take so long. So the goals are very similar to what you've seen. We're very, very similar to what you've seen in the past. With the exception of for each goal, I tried to add some evidence into the outcome. I thought that was the feedback I heard from you. So you have it linked, but like in the first goal, I have an exit ticket that we give to that all the leaders do after a meeting. The questions, maybe it's coming. Oh, there you go. So questions that will be asked of them, and how did you rate this experience? What was the best part of the meeting? But I think the part that's probably most interesting is, what will you take back to your school and building meeting, and what have you implemented since last meeting? Is there anything else they need to know? Okay, I made Mr. Brown happy.
Very happy.
My work here is done. Thank you very much.
Good night. It's actually amazing data for us, too. You know
It
what
really
The idea
is.
that,
I
like,
mean,
what
you know,
have
I always say to Kristen, "Is the data in yet?" Like, it's good for us to be able to see that, and the principals give really good feedback about things that they need to know, and I think that they're feeling very comfortable in letting us know what they need, to the point where, you know, one principal said, "I would really like to have a every other week meeting or with one of you about some of the work that I'm doing here." I thought, well, isn't that great? And then in goal 2, I added for evidence in order to meet the goal in terms of tier 1 instruction, HQIM, and then MTSS. We'll look at MAP scores, DIBELS, and this year we are we're in process of revamping our student assistant team process. So the student assistant team process is a process in each of our schoolhouses where teachers have the ability to bring forth a student that they may be having some questions or concerns about, and the team helps them determine some of the things that they might be able to do to address the needs of the students. Lots of times people will say it's sort of the step before an evaluation, and it is, but we like to think of it, it's also, you may never go to evaluation, and that's what we hope if the student assistant team is used correctly. What we've discovered is that process is not as consistent as we'd like to see in all of our schoolhouses, and so we're working on making a very consistent practice. So that's your evidence. And then in goal 3, I believe that the budget updates and the budget sheets that you're receiving are evidence in terms of reducing last year's $5.5 million deficit. And I forgot to do it on the last one. I'm so sorry. The superintendent and school committee goals. But I think that really the FY26 will be the evidence that we've created that budget.
Yes. Thank you. And we're going to...
Questions or?
Any further follow-up questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Lathrop, for
You're
making
welcome.
those changes.
Kudos. No questions, just happiness.
Mr. Moskovich.
No, I'm not sure Mr. Brown is done.
Yeah, he was done.
I'm done, yeah. Go ahead.
So I don't see it now, but I read all these today and carefully wrote a note to myself about what questions I had. In one case, you were talking about measuring our ability to move forward children who were struggling, and you were going to do it sort of demographically. And I'm hoping that we can get to the point where, and we have the data, because we do have DIBELS data and we have math data, that we can start defining the children who we're interested in because they weren't very far along when they started. And then we don't really need to. Demographics in the aggregate is a useful forecaster, but if we can do it by just saying, you know, our goal is to take children who started out far behind and move them, I think that would be a better way to do it. But it's not really a questioning of your goals.
I agree. I mean, I think we did talk about that last time. It's so what the outcome is really looking at Hispanic and Latino students, and we talked about that sort of globally. I think we have been working very hard on closing the achievement gap. We have seen a great differences between our Hispanic and Latino students, and that's why I continue to focus on it. But that other work is still being done through the district goals as well.
So you reminded me that I was going to point out that there are two different ways to close an achievement gap. And one is to move the children who are far behind faster, and the other is to slow the growth of the children who are doing well, which obviously you don't intend. But it's why that it's always struck me as a kind of an imperfect measure.
It isn't perfect, right? I think that's why the state has, the last few years, offered financial resources to do accelerated academies to try to move students at that faster rate.
And then I had one little comment about the budget. And it's really kind of what I said, mentioned before, that at some point, we're probably going to need to have some kind of discussion with the town about whether we can do the job that we would want and they would want with the resources we have. And that I know that you're thinking about doing that, but it'd probably be nice to say that's one of the goals, is to work towards being able to say to the town, this is where we want to go, this is what it's going to take. And if that's the case, we're going to need more resources than the track we're on. I'm not saying that you should say that, but I mean, just think about being able to help us make that case.
I think that's why that's in the superintendent school committee shared goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Oh,
where
I
that
see.
would go,
Okay.
because, ultimately that is the school committee's
That's our job.
decision.
I think
Right.
that's part of our.
And doesn't that
But-
link to the proposed budget directives, which is?
Correct.
Okay.
But we can only do, I agree, but
I think so.
we need your help to do it, because,
Absolutely.
I think maybe
yeah, okay.
Alyssa wanted to be here for that.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have that on here.
It's part of the goals, though. It's linked in the goals. So if we're,
It says, I believe it says draft budget
Yeah.
directive, so if you want
I think we
to be
push it
part
off
of
to
the
the next meeting so we can do
Okay.
it official.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
And
so we're
whatever
just-
those are.
The
would be
linked
put-
ones in here, I'll make sure it says draft if you approve, because then I can change it.
Okay. So would we approve these without looking at the individual documents that's linked to it, though? Or is that what we're doing tonight? Are we voting?
We're going to vote on the superintendent's goals tonight. Our goal will be to create proposed budget directives. We have them in draft form, and we will formally approve those, and they'll just exist in draft form until they're officially approved by us at a different meeting. But they're going to be the evidence regardless of what they say, because that's part of the process that we have to do them.
I missed something. We have what in draft form?
Our budget directives.
The school committee's budget.
School committee budget directives for the superintendent, and we're going to vote on them next time, I believe.
But we haven't voted on them.
We have not.
And they're
And
linked
we
to
haven't
here.
seen them either, have we?
No, we have. They're right there.
We started to create them last time.
You saw you saw our draft last time. You can,
Yeah,
Christine,
you
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 can
want
click
to
on
click
it, it's
on it?
public.
Yeah.
And so we can change it to draft. This is a draft of the FY26 budget directives. Under strategies and activities in my goal, it says create proposed. I could change it to follow school committee budget directives. But I think you're going to I think that's on your agenda for,
Yeah, and I think officially, like, right now, the goal is going to stay the same. These are some of the strategies and activities we would do. They are identified that can be used as evidence, but we are neither limited nor required to do all those things.
and it's in my goal too. I was going to say you could just vote on goals 1 through 3, which are my goals, and the last
But-
goal is superintendent.
But whatever the proposed budget directives are going to be, or like, they are going to be. I don't know if it matters if we add one in next time. It's still going to be the budget directives, and we have an understanding that those are going to be followed.
So, right, so the superintendent's goal is to follow those directives.
Right.
Correct.
And
Whatever they may
realistically-
end up being. Yeah.
And historically, Ms. Cormier, we have typically voted on the goals for the superintendent much earlier than this too,
Okay.
knowing that might be a thing that we would then expect to happen.
Okay. So would it be possible, since we want to vote on these tonight, and that's the right thing to do, could we just not have them linked in what we're voting on?
Sure.
Would that be?
So unlink the
Just
proposed
unlink
budget
for-
directives.
Yes.
Mhm.
because we haven't reviewed and talked about them. But I
That's
think
perfectly
I
fine.
think those are so important. Obviously, I think we all
Yeah,
do think
no, I
they're so
agree.
important, and that
Yeah.
way they're here. They're in draft and they're floating around, but that way it's just not linked in here. Is
Absolutely.
that
Makes
That's fine.
sense. Yep.
okay?
And then we will link them.
Yeah, link when
Once
we
they're
get them.
approved.
They
Yeah.
are unlinked. Done. Magic.
Wow, look at that.
Do we do it on both of them?
Did you do it on the superintendent's school committee goal too?
All right, and I have a clarifying question. So
Thank you.
hypothetically, let's suppose we decide, despite what our town manager tells us, we should shoot for, that it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And say we decide we as a school committee want to request more. Does that become a budget directive? Like how
I think
would that
be
happen?
part of our realistic budget for FY26.
Oh, okay. All right.
Realistic is,
Meeting the educational needs of the district.
it could also be realistic that this is the amount of money we have, or realistic this is what it means to do what we need to do.
Right, or to offer the town an alternative.
We
Say,
said-
like,
or-
guys,
right.
we can live within this amount of money, but this is what we won't have, right? And if we want that stuff, we got to spend more. And we gotta
Realistically
get-
saying what that's going to cost would be appropriate.
Yeah. So that will be my question is, will that be we need to capture that, so that would be part of the
That might be in the budget directives.
in the budget directives. Okay.
Yep.
So we don't
So
need
to
it doesn't
propose
need
the
to
budget
be.
and if necessary, recommend like in the budget directives we could work on the language, which is like
Perfect, like I
Right.
just suggested. Okay, and so that argues even stronger on Lincoln.
there might be one more thing there.
All right, good. And it's unlinked from both the shared goal and the individual goal. You said, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
The vice chair would entertain a motion regarding the superintendent's goals for the 20.
Mr. Vice Chair,
25
I would
school
like
year.
to move that we accept the goals as edited by removing the links.
Second?
Oh,
Sorry.
Ben had it.
No,
I
Miss
guess
Miss
it's-
Cormier
Mr.
seconded
Nope,
it.
I gave it to you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to a vote. Mr. Moskovich,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Cormier.
Yes.
And the vice chair votes yes. New business, we have a field trip request two field trip requests from the robotics team. They're in your packet. We previously approved, these are for two different signature events for the robotics teams to attend. We previously approved one of these up in Maine at the very beginning of the school year, if you remember. More opportunities for them to compete and advance and qualify for Worlds.
There was a question about the chaperones and if the chaperones have Corys. And both of those is the same chaperones that have been on the trips in the past, and they are all Coried. And they are not, the teacher won't be traveling, so substitute won't be an issue.
So it's a field trip, but no teacher.
School sanctioned trip.
School sanctioned.
They're competing, is that right?
They're competing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but the teacher will not be present
At either one?
at either one.
Oh, wow.
The chaperones are parents of the students.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for them for
Absolutely.
chaperoning.
Yeah.
If they're going to Alabama, they need coaching and colors. It's very important to distinguish blue and orange from crimson. And you
They're
also
going
have
to Auburn, Alabama, so they would need to wear what color?
blue and orange.
Blue and orange.
Yes, and they're supposed to know what tide means.
Something in Auburn, something
So
bad.
Sorry?
Isn't it, if you're going to Auburn, a roll tide would be not good, right?
Right, you don't want to be wearing that.
You've got it exactly right.
I can now
Perhaps
travel.
you can coach them.
Yes.
If the committee has other
No, I was just saying, yeah, go ahead.
other questions or clarifications that they would need, please let the chair know via email. These are for departing on the 31st of January and the 12th of February, and I would love to have these approved at the next meeting on the 5th so that they can buy plane tickets. Public comment?
Well,
There's none.
So,
Wait,
I
Ed
have
has
one.
And so do I, but
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I looked up for public and there was none.
Do you want me to move my chair over there?
Mr. Moskovich, you have
So-
3 minutes.
Several weeks ago, we had received what I thought was a very persuasive and thoughtful letter from a parent about cell phone policy. And I see that good stuff is going on. And I know we started the discussion. I just want to record my interest that at some point, and I think the superintendent's got other things to worry about right now, so I'm not trying to say we should drop everything, but at some point, I think they're very serious issues, and when administration has had a time to sort of think about this and put a policy together, I'd like, sometime in the spring, that we discuss that.
Quick response to public comment. Is that okay or no?
Very,
Very quick at that, there is a committee already working on a cell phone policy.
No, I caught that. Right, good.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, public comment. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, I won't need it. Just a suggestion that we consider putting on the agenda shortly, that we get our superintendent search underway.
Yes. I expect that to be in the quick response. I expect to be on the agenda for the 5th
Perfect.
or the next steps.
And could I add to that, Mr. Hicks, that you made a suggestion several weeks ago, and then I made a similar one about some sort of listening effort?
Yes.
And that I thought we all agreed it was going to happen, but it hasn't. And my thought was it should be done before the search. And I did talk to the director of MASC just about this in general, and he said that's a good idea, and that he offered, I think for zero amount, which would appeal to Ms. Cormier, but for very little, that he would come here for a day, hold a whole bunch of listening sessions. This is consistent with you don't want to know who the people are, but you want to hear what they have to say. He would have several different meetings. He'd be accessible to teachers, to parents, to FinCom, and then he'd write us a report. So we wouldn't need to do an RFP. We wouldn't need to, if we spent much, it'd be very little. It would be very easy to do.
Thank you.
And I think we should take him up on that.
Thank you very much. Seeing there's no other public comment, our next meeting is Thursday, December 5th. It's a wonderful day. It's my twins' birthday, but I'll be here.
Your
Eleanor
20th, did you say?
My twins' birthday. They'll turn 13
Oh,
that
your
day.
twins. Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
Eleanor has told me that she doesn't want to go out to dinner that night because she has gymnastics practice. So we're going to do it on the 4th.
Priorities.
Thank you, Eleanor.
So Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would love to move that we adjourn.
And I would love to second it.
Mr. Moskovich,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Cormier.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. We are adjourned at 9:09.